Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. Striking a balance on immigration policy. That's what President Biden says is his goal as he announces sweeping protections for illegal immigrants, just about a week after taking other executive action on the southern border. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
And President Biden on Tuesday announced a new sweeping executive action that will allow illegal immigrants who are married to U.S. citizens who have a parent who is to apply for a green card here in the U.S. without having to leave the country. These applicants must have been living in the U.S. for at least 10 years. Biden, in an event celebrating the 12th anniversary of Daca, says today's move aims to keep families together.
Paying taxes, contributing to our country for 10 years or more, all this time, with fear and uncertainty. We can fix that, and that's what I'm going to do today. Fix it.
The administration says the new order will provide legal status for about 500,000 people. It comes as Biden is seeking to appeal to Latino voters who are key to his re-election bid. It's also an olive branch to immigration advocates who have been criticizing Biden for his executive action 2 weeks ago that sought to limit asylum at the southern border. Biden today highlighting caveats in his new order and stressing that he won't sacrifice border security.
Requires them to pass a criminal background checks. And it doesn't apply to anyone trying to come here today. I refuse to believe that to secure our border, we have to walk away from being in America.
Still, Republicans are sharply criticizing Biden for the new order. Former President Trump's campaign is accusing Biden of creating, quote, another invitation for illegal immigration. And Senator Josh Hawley is vowing to investigate Biden's policy if Republicans take back the Senate. And today's action, along with Biden's immigration policy overall, will surely be a major focus during the debate next week between Biden and Trump.
This announcement that we're taking today is squarely within our legal authorities.
Meanwhile, questions remain about potential legal challenges facing Biden's order. And just like how President Biden undid a lot of Trump's immigration policies, and this order on Tuesday could also be revoked by a future administration, especially given the fact that it would take a long time for these new immigration applications to come in and eventually get processed. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has strong words of warning for the Chinese Communist Party about their decision to fuel Russia's war with Ukraine. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more from D.C.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says that the Chinese regime will face consequences if it continues fueling Russia's war with Ukraine. He met with Secretary of State Antony Blinken here in Washington just ahead of the NATO summit, saying that China is a critical component in fueling Russia's war machine.
China cannot have it both ways. They cannot continue to have normal trade relationships with countries in Europe and at the same time fuel the biggest war we have seen in Europe since the Second World War. So at some stage this has to have consequences for China.
As for what those consequences would be, it's
too early to say, but it has to be an issue that we need to address because to continue as we do today is not viable.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken said China's support for Russia is what's keeping the war going.
Some 70% of the machine tools that Russia's importing are coming from China. 90% of the microelectronics coming from China, and that has enabled Russia to keep that defense industrial base going, to keep the war machine going, to keep the war going.
This comes as Russian President Vladimir Putin just touched down in North Korea on Wednesday. Russia is working to overcome U.S.-led sanctions while gaining munitions from North Korea.
We see how much military support Russia gets from North Korea, but also from Iran, and how China is propping up their war economy.
The heads of the NATO member countries will meet here in Washington on July 9th for the three-day summit. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And Secretary of State Antony Blinken also facing challenges in the Middle East. Israel's prime minister is accusing the U.S. of withholding certain weapons, but says Blinken has promised to remove those restrictions. NTD's international correspondent Ariane Pasdar has the war update and a warning the footage in this story may be disturbing to some viewers.
Last month, President Biden said that he would not supply offensive weapons to Israel. That's over concerns that Israel could use those weapons to launch an all-out assault on Rafah in Gaza. But Israel now says that the U.S. changed its position. Watch.
Secretary Blinken assured me that the administration is working day and night to remove these bottlenecks. I certainly hope that's the case. It should be the case.
Blinken responded to Netanyahu's comments when pressed by a reporter.
You assured him that these bottlenecks will...
I'm not going to talk about what we said in diplomatic conversations.
He added that the U.S. will continue to supply Israel with tools to defend itself, such as ammunition for the Iron Dome. The White House, meanwhile, says it's working to secure a deal that would lead to long-term peace in the region.
We're trying to make sure we get this hostage deal, working very hard in a diplomatic way. We believe this hostage deal will play part in lowering the tensions.
She added that another part of decreasing those tensions is the visit of a senior U.S. advisor who's in Lebanon on Tuesday. His visit comes after Hezbollah fired hundreds of rockets from Lebanon into Israel in recent days, causing multiple fires.
Innocent people are dying, property is damaged, families are shattered, and the Lebanese economy continues to decline.
The senior advisor, the White House, and the State Department all stressed that they want to avoid a wider conflict in the region. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, thousands of Israelis protested outside the parliament on Tuesday. They're calling for a new government and the resignation of Netanyahu.
We need to end this war and we need to release the hostages, and we need a responsible government of people that are interested in the future of our country and not in their own personal interests.
The protests took place just a day after Netanyahu dissolved the country's war cabinet. That's after former General Benny Gantz left the emergency unit government. And Israeli strikes reportedly killed at least 17 people at 2 refugee camps in Gaza on Tuesday. That's according to hospital officials and residents. NTD can't independently verify that number.
People and neighbors started screaming. We went out into the street and found bodies and body parts thrown out, and massive destruction, as you can see.
The Israeli military did not directly comment on the deaths, but said that its forces continued to operate against terrorist factions in central Gaza areas. Ariane Pastar, NTD News.
Over 260 million people in the U.S. will face temperatures at or above 90 degrees this week. That's 80% of the country. The temperatures expected don't even factor in humidity, which will make it feel even hotter.
The National Weather Service said yesterday multi-day excessive heat is expected to tie or break temperature records in up to 200 cities across the country. Authorities say temperatures are 10 to 25 degrees higher than normal for this time of year. New York City is preparing for temperatures that may feel like up to 107 degrees.
The first heat wave of the season is here and we are ready. We want to be clear, this is extremely hot for June.
People in Pennsylvania are coping with the heat by visiting public pools, enjoying ice cream, and adapting their activities to the weather.
When we have a hot spell like this, make a few minor changes, less yard work, more work inside. Today we're at the community center walking, whereas we normally would walk outside in a park or at a lake or something like that. So we just made minor changes, just making sure that you stay hydrated, pets are hydrated, air conditioning works, and you just kind of ride it out.
The culprit behind this weather is a heat dome covering much of the country. A heat dome occurs when hot air is trapped under high pressure, creating extreme heat as if under a lid. This happens when strong high-pressure systems remain stationary for an extended period.
I don't really like the hot, so this is going to be very painful for me, but I'm going to have to do what I have to do.
Others are enjoying the heat.
I welcome the heat. It really hasn't impacted my daily routine in a negative way. It gives me opportunity to get out and do some things in the yard and around the house.
I'm enjoying it. I like the heat. I just wish I had a pool to enjoy the heat more.
Animals aren't immune to the hot weather. In Phoenix, zookeepers take special precautions to keep animals safe in temperatures that could top 110 degrees.
So the way I see it, as soon as we start feeling uncomfortable, that's probably when it's time to start misting them down. These guys will have a little higher heat tolerance than your average person, but even so, they're not immune to the effects of heat. So just as often as possible.
Officials across the country are advising people to stay hydrated, limit strenuous activity in the sun, and wear lightweight clothing. Temperatures are expected to remain elevated in large swaths of the country until the weekend.
Fire officials are concerned that New Mexico's fire could be pushed eastward by winds. Hundreds of people have evacuated with roads closed down. California also battling fires during fire season. Here are the updates.
As of Tuesday, fire crews are still battling the New Mexico fires, where two fast-moving fires converged together near the southern part of the state. The entire village of Ruidoso was required to evacuate yesterday, home to around 8,000 people. The village has been closed. They received an order to go now, saying, "Do not attempt to gather belongings or protect your home. Evacuate immediately." New Mexico's utility company says it's shutting down power for public safety reasons, affecting 800 customers. Red Cross reported that nearly 400 people checked into shelters in Roswell and Capitan. The South Fork fire was nearly 14,000 acres and 0% contained, according to New Mexico fire data. Around 500 structures are estimated to be impacted. This fire was discovered at 9 a.m. on Monday, burning around the village of Ruidoso. It connected with the Salt Fire, nearly 5,000 acres, 0% contained. In Southern California, the NOAA said the Post Fire burned more than 15,000 acres. It's 20% contained, located about 65 miles northwest of Los Angeles.
We have 2.5 years of unburned fuel in a lot of places because we haven't had a big major fire over the last couple of seasons. We've had them just bumping off, but not to this size. So there's a lot of unburnt fuel out there and a lot of growth. And with the wind and the low humidity, they've dried out already.
Northern California also has the Sites Fire, which sent black clouds of smoke into the air in Colusa County. 1,000 people evacuated. The fire departments battled against high temperatures, low humidity, and strong winds, which CAL FIRE says hamper their containment efforts. David Lamb, NTD News.
Senate Republicans today thwarted Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's efforts to ban bump stocks. The vote came after the Supreme Court ruled to strike down a Trump-era ban last week. Democratic Senator Martin Heinrich asked for an unanimous consent on the effort, but Nebraska Republican Peter Ricketts objected. Bump stocks are a firearm accessory that allow guns to shoot in more quickly. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. On Capitol Hill today, senators are grilling the CEO of Boeing. The head of the plane maker must answer to what lawmakers refer to as Boeing's broken safety culture. NTD's Don Ma has more.
Boeing CEO David Calhoun grilled by Congress in a fiery hearing Tuesday. It's the latest congressional hearing this year about safety issues at Boeing. But the first time Calhoun is testifying in his more than 4 years running the troubled company. Calhoun apologized to families who lost loved ones in two 737 MAX crashes. He also accepted responsibility after a January mid-air emergency. Calhoun acknowledged the Alaska Airlines door plug incident on January 5th was the result of a manufacturing defect. In terms of Boeing's broken safety culture, Calhoun says he knows retaliation against whistleblowers happens. He did not say if anyone was punished for retaliating. He says COVID has contributed to much of the problem.
The post-COVID moment in the aerospace industry has been unbelievably difficult to navigate. We have 10,000 suppliers. We put almost 2.5 million parts into a 787. Boeing, because it's big and it has resources, even those were strained, we were able to keep more than most. But like you say, we turned over a lot of people, and yes, a lot of experienced people. Our supply chain experienced enormous turnover.
Calhoun was repeatedly questioned about how much he is paid, which is about $33 million last year. Senator Josh Hawley questioned why Calhoun received a 45% raise while doing so much wrong and why he hasn't resigned.
You're strip mining it. You're strip mining Boeing. It was one of the greatest American companies ever. It has employed thousands of people in my state, and you are strip mining it for profit, shareholder value, and you're being rewarded for it. You got a huge raise, a huge increase. So it's working out great for you. For the American people, they're in danger. For your workers, they're in peril. For your whistleblowers, they literally fear for their lives, but you're getting compensated like never before. Why haven't you resigned?
Senator, I'm sticking this through. I'm proud of having taken the job. I'm proud of our
this
safety record, and I am very proud of our Boeing people.
You're proud of this safety record?
I am proud of every action we have taken.
Every action you've taken?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
The hearing comes right after a new whistleblower emerged. This is according to Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal. The whistleblower claims that Boeing improperly stored airplane parts and also hid the fact from the FAA. The whistleblower, current Boeing employee Sam Mohawk, says his bosses ordered him to destroy records. The records said that certain airplane parts were problematic. Boeing said in a statement that it's reviewing the whistleblower's claims. The company also said it has increased the size of its quality team. Senator Blumenthal called the hearing a moment of reckoning for Boeing. He says there is overwhelming evidence that the Justice Department should pursue prosecution against Boeing.
There's a new king in the tech world thanks to artificial intelligence. Today, Nvidia has overtaken Microsoft as the world's most valuable company. Shares of the chipmaker climbed 3.7% to just over $135 a share. That makes its market value more than $3.3 trillion, greater than Microsoft. Nvidia stock has surged about 170% so far this year. Just days ago, it overtook Apple to become the second most valuable company. Senators are investigating the origins of the COVID-19 virus. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez was at today's hearing and brings us the details.
The Senate's Committee on Homeland Security heard testimony from 4 experts as part of its investigation into the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. During his opening remarks, Democratic Senator Gary Peters, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee in the Senate, highlighted the challenges that Americans faced during the health emergency.
As Americans navigated the COVID-19 pandemic, they endured changing healthcare guidance, uncertainty and misinformation about how to best protect themselves and their families from this deadly virus.
Republican senators like Senator Ron Johnson focused their line on questioning on the sub-grants from the NIH and NIAID that ended up funding research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China that some Republicans believe constitutes gain-of-function research.
Really trying to get at is the purpose of this hearing, is asking the question, should we be funding, should we be engaged, should we be regulating to a much greater extent gain-of-function research?
Biodefense expert Gregory Koblenz supported the natural transmission COVID-19 origin theory, but also highlighted that the lack of transparency from the Chinese regime makes any determination near impossible.
I believe the available evidence points most strongly to a natural zoonotic spillover event as the origin of the pandemic. However, a research-related accident can't be ruled out at this time. A key obstacle to more definitive conclusion is the lack of transparency exercised by the Chinese government, which affects assessments of both potential pathways to the pandemic.
2 other experts who testified argue in favor of the lab leak COVID-19 origin theory. The split views demonstrate the controversial aspect of the investigation. I spoke with Republican Senator Roger Marshall, and he argued that the investigation should be taken off the spotlight.
Really what the next step is a 9/11 style commission. There's too many bright lights here. There's too many cameras. It's too political. We need to get this outside of Washington, D.C. and investigate this. And then how do we prevent the next pandemic from happening?
I also spoke with Republican Senator Rick Scott from Florida, and he agreed that the U.S. government should better define and better regulate gain-of-function research. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The shooter who opened fire at an LGBT nightclub in Colorado has pleaded guilty to 50 federal hate crime charges. He's now lined up for several life sentences, along with 190 years on gun charges and other counts. The incident took place at Club Q in Colorado Springs, where 24-year-old Anderson Lee Aldrich killed 5 and injured 19 others. A U.S. district judge handed down the sentence after hearing from survivors and victims' families. Aldrich took a plea deal with prosecutors to avoid the death penalty. Prior to this, he was already serving a lifetime prison sentence after being convicted on state charges last year. Medical intervention for minors suffering from gender dysphoria is now restricted in half the country, about 25 states. With so many new laws on the horizon, there's concern that some hospitals aren't complying. A Texas surgeon has just been charged by the Justice Department with obtaining protected health information for patients not under his care at the Texas Children's Hospital. The indictment, unsealed on Monday, claims that Dr. Ethan Heim accessed the data unlawfully and later shared it with a media contact. Heim claims he shared the information in order to blow the whistle on the hospital's continuation of transgender procedures on minors. For more on this and the current state of medical procedures for minors with gender dysphoria, we spoke with biologist and NTD News contributor Colin Wright. Colin Wright, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Hey, thank you so much.
Now, a surgeon is charged with obtaining protected patient information without authorization. Now, he stated that his intention was to reveal that the hospital he was working at had continued transgender medical interventions on minors. This is despite pledging to stop. Now, to begin, tell us, what is the current state of transparency from hospitals when it comes to these types of procedures being carried out on minors?
Not good at all, and we've seen a shift. For a long time, hospitals, they were performing these types of pediatric sex changes out in the open on their websites. They weren't even trying to hide it. Then you saw the shift after normal people started simply posting screenshots of web pages of children's hospitals advertising these extreme procedures on minors, even genital surgeries. The typical response has been to take down the websites and keep everything hidden. And this is extremely odd behavior if you think about it, because if the procedures are truly beneficial to young people, you would expect hospitals to openly defend them against public's criticism. I always give an analogy. If people started online complaining about hospitals' websites saying that they were treating kids with cancer with radiation, and people started freaking out about that, they wouldn't bury the websites. They would probably just come out and give you the evidence for the benefits of radiation therapy in treating deadly cancers. So a lot of this has gone underground, and now we have to rely pretty much on whistleblowers to bring these practices to the surface. Fortunately, we have many states that are drafting legislations to put age limits on these procedures.
Given that, what do we know about the amount and kind of transgender procedures that are being done on minors in hospitals across the U.S.?
I mean, it's everything. It's puberty blockers, it's cross-sex hormones, it's double mastectomies, it's even genital surgeries. You commonly hear that genital surgeries are only reserved for patients who are over 18 years old, and that is just emphatically not true. There's been multiple papers that have come out that have had interviews with private surgeons who have performed these surgeries on kids as young as 15 years old, genital surgeries, I mean. So it's extremely prevalent. Unfortunately, it's gotten to the point where we can't keep, when the medical organizations and institutions are failing to regulate themselves, states, legislatures have to sort of pick up the slack for this now. So we've entered the age of lawfare, and that's really unfortunate, but it's kind of the only thing we have right to do now when ideology seems to be the guiding star as opposed to evidence-based medicine.
And Colin, to your earlier point about this trend that we're seeing, this case in Texas does follow the landmark Cass review and also the American College of Pediatricians, which is made up about 700 conservative medical providers, are urging medical professionals to stop these procedures on minors. Why do you think we are seeing this trend in medical professionals and institutions who are speaking out against this?
So the Cass review that was published in the UK, this was a landmark study. It was based on 7 brand new reviews of the evidence, systematic evidence reviews that showed that the evidence for these sex change procedures in minors has essentially no good evidence to back them up. We saw that European countries and Britain's NHS and a lot of other countries, they've since backed away from these procedures and aligning their policies with the best available evidence, as was reviewed in the Cass review. Hillary Cass, who the Cass Review is named after, said that basically no U.S. medical organizations or institutions even reached out. They practically haven't even acknowledged its existence, despite it being the best evidence we currently have on this. Only a few very small organizations have come forward in the U.S. to issue any statements in support of the Cass Review, and it's really just been radio silence for among the largest ones, which is extremely concerning because, again, this is the best available evidence we have, and their silence, and even many have come forward actually chastising the Cass Review and putting it down as somehow being ideological in and of itself, which is, of course, absurd.
Given the changes we're seeing in European countries, when do you expect to see those same changes here in the U.S.?
That is such a good question, and it's really difficult because in the U.S. we just have the political polarization is to such a degree that they don't have in the U.K. and a lot of other European countries. This has become just a political issue. Honestly, one side is trying to ground their policies based in evidence, and because one side is saying one thing, the other side just has to say the opposite. It seems to be the way things are going. So the U.S. is becoming increasingly an outlier, and so it's really just going to take the fact that the whole world is going to have to change to make the U.S. look increasingly stupid on this issue. And then maybe they'll be the next domino to fall at some point, the U.S. will. But then there's Canada, who's even further behind, and Australia. They're kind of doing their own thing too and seem to be impervious to any of this evidence. We'll see some more systematic reviews that are being performed by the American Academy of Pediatrics. We're just hoping that somehow ideology doesn't commandeer that process somehow. So we need to make sure to urge transparency from all these U.S. organizations when they're performing their own reviews. And likely they're going to come to the same conclusions that every systematic review has come to it, showing that there's really no good evidence for any of these procedures.
Colin Wright, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Joining me now to discuss Biden's immigration program is Javier Palomares, founder and CEO of U.S. Hispanic Business Council. Javier, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. Now, President Biden just unveiled one of the biggest relief programs for undocumented workers since the Obama-era Daca program, which stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. With today actually being the 12th anniversary of Daca, tell us about the current status of Dreamers, as they're called, and what you think needs to be done to resolve this long fought over issue.
Well, let me say first off, Tiffany, that citizenship for DACA recipients and undocumented spouses and children of American citizens is exactly the right thing to do. Credit where credit is due. I don't always agree with President Biden, but I'm 1,000% in agreement with him. I'm behind him on this one. I think this is the right thing to do and offer, a pathway to citizenship for these deserving individuals. Look, we have a lot of work to do when it comes to immigration reform. There's much yet to do in terms of the security of our nation, the crisis at the border, and other things. But of late, President Biden has done two things that I think are exactly what I expect from an American president. First, he's tried to resolve the backlog, at the border and made some tough decisions, the right decisions, I might add. And today's announcement about DACA and pathways to citizenship, again, for individuals that deserve it. At the end of the day, Tiffany, this responsibility, this accountability lies squarely on the shoulders of our Congress. Executive actions, presidential maneuvers are not the solution. They never have been. They never will be. At the end of the day, we need our members of Congress on both sides of the aisle to quit politicizing this issue, to work together for the betterment of the American people and certainly the American economy. Only Congress can pass immigration reform.
Now, part of the argument for giving DACA recipients a pathway to citizenship is that they are already tax-paying, contributing members of our society. Tell us more about that, how DACA recipients contribute economically, especially.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Tiffany. Right off the bat, 90% of DACA eligible people are employed. In fact, DACA recipients have a better employment rate than their native-born counterparts, than American-born individuals. Their native-born counterparts have a 77% employment rate compared to a 90% employment rate among DACA recipients. About 400,000 of them hold either essential or frontline jobs like firefighters, teachers, nurses, doctors, policemen, and members of the military. So they're doing critical work for the betterment of the American people, the safety of the American people. When it comes to taxes, they pay a little over $9.5 billion in taxes, about 6.5 in federal taxes, and another $3 billion or so in state and local taxes. So they're paying their taxes, they're earning their way, they are employed, they're critically working, in jobs that truly matter for our nation. And above and beyond all of that, none of them can have any kind of criminal activity or a criminal record of any kind. The minute they do, they lose their Daca designation and can be deported almost immediately. So these are the poster people. These are the poster children for the kinds of people you want living in our country. They're contributing to this nation, the only nation they know, by the way, the only country they know, and the country they love so much. So this is the right thing to do. It's long overdue. We need to come together for the betterment of the American people and certainly the American economy. Giving Daca recipients a pathway to citizenship is absolutely what the doctor ordered.
On that note, Daca recipients are allowed to work in the U.S. by obtaining work permits, something they have to renew every 2 years. But recently, we've heard reports of Daca recipients being unable to work and earn an income due to work permit delays caused by an enormous backlog of immigration cases. How widespread is this type of issue? What are some of the other challenges Daca recipients face working in the U.S. legally?
Yeah, sadly, the backlog has gotten to a critical situation. There are more than, I believe, 4 million backlog cases. And so the process, as you can imagine, has bogged down. I hear about this practically every day, either companies or individuals themselves that are reaching out to our association saying, listen, we're in a bad way. We need the workers. They want to work. They're incredible at the job they do. We want them here, but their work permit is about to expire. Their visa is about to expire. They're going through the process, but they're already being told that it's going to be months, maybe years, before they can renew their permits to continue to work. In the meantime, they're unemployed, and they don't want that. Our companies don't want that. Our economy can't afford that. We have a number of challenges, particularly when it comes to the renewal and their ability to continue to work. That's all they want, is to continue to work legally, continue to pay their taxes, and continue to contribute to the American economy. So I'm hopeful, again, that Congress will find a path forward and find a way to identify these individuals, give them the relief they need and the relief the American business community needs.
Now, on the flip side, Daca has been ruled unlawful twice over the past 2 years, first by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, and then again last year by a Texas district court. Now, since its inception, it has been a highly politicized issue with both sides resistant to compromise. Why do you think it's such a politicized issue? How do we move beyond that?
I can't answer as to why, but clearly it has been politicized. And to the detriment of the American economy. Look at it this way, Tiffany. Right now, there are a little more than 8 million unfilled jobs in America. And there are about 6 million Americans looking for work that are capable and legally can get work. So if all 6 million of those Americans looking for work got a job tomorrow, we'd still have 2 million unfilled jobs in this nation. And that's where immigrants come in. They are the ones cleaning that room in the hospitality industry, roofing that house in the construction industry, putting that piece of equipment together in the manufacturing industry, harvesting that crop in the agricultural industry, and the list goes on. To demonize these individuals is not only disingenuous, it's absolutely wrong. It's an insult to the American voter. At the end of the day, if you added up all of the Daca recipients, all of the spouses, undocumented spouses of American citizens, and all their children, they would equate to just about 1 million people total. But in a country of 394 million people, that's about 1/4 of 1% of our total population. So the demonizing has to stop. The fear mongering has to stop. We need to come together, work, for the betterment of the American economy, work from both sides of the aisle to find resolution for this issue. It's the right thing to do. Look, we're America. We're a country that for time immemorial has honored hard work. We have honored our commitments. And this is what this instant in time, this is what this moment in time is all about. It's about honoring our commitment to these deserving individuals. It's time we did what America should be doing, finding a pathway to citizenship for these individuals that are paying their taxes, are employed, are doing all the right things, and frankly, are a boon to the American economy.
Javier Palomares, founder and CEO of U.S. Hispanic Business Council, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This year's Father's Day celebration took on a somber tone for one father and son now living in Germany. The son is raising awareness across Europe for his father, who's been imprisoned in China for over a year just because of his faith. NTD's Flora Hua has more on the story.
Ding and his father haven't been able to celebrate Father's Day for 2 years. Last May, Chinese police arrested his parents in the northern city of Erdao, China, without an arrest warrant. That's because of their faith in spiritual meditation practice Falun Gong. The Chinese Communist Party has been using national resources to defame and persecute the faith group for almost 25 years.
Due to the persecution of Falun Gong in China, I haven't seen my parents for 12 years. Now, my family is separated. My father is being illegally detained in the Chinese Shandong province prison. My mother is under surveillance, and I, their only child, am in exile in Germany. For more than 1 year, I have not get any chance to talk to my father, and the CCP authorities do not allow any family members to visit my father in prison. So I don't know how my father is really doing there. And they openly claim that a Falun Gong practitioner's death would not be a big deal. So I was extremely worried about my father.
According to survivors of the persecution, the CCP uses various means to force Falun Gong practitioners to give up their faith, including physical abuse and sleep deprivation. Ding is working to raise global awareness, organizing overseas campaigns that call on the Chinese regime to set his father free. His effort has gained wide support from many EU political figures, but also angered Chinese authorities.
The Chinese policeman came to the home of my mother and threatened her and told her, "We will imprison your husband just because of the protest letters, just because of your son." So they will never stop to try and silence me. And these reactions show that the Chinese authorities are extremely afraid of the international society because they are afraid of being exposed their crimes against Falun Gong practitioners.
So you have been calling on politicians in Europe to help your family. And so what does it look like with their support today?
In January of this year, the European Parliament has passed a resolution on the persecution of Falun Gong and singled out the case of my parents. The resolution demands the immediate release of my father and all Falun Gong practitioners in China. And it also calls for sanctions against all perpetrators and entities who have contributed to the persecution of Falun Gong in China and abroad.
Member of EU Parliament Mariam Laxman reposted Ding's Father's Day post and urged the bloc to do more to defend persecuted groups. She added that standing up for values makes us stronger.
Mr. Ding, can you tell us a little bit more about your father?
My father is, for me, the best father. I'm extremely proud of him because determination and his courage, not only for his faith, but also his great courage to help stop the persecution of Falun Gong in China.
Do you have anything to say to your father who's still in a Chinese prison today?
Every millisecond of the persecution of Falun Gong by the CCP is an incredible injustice. I will dedicate myself to free my father from the state crime.
Flora Hua, NTD News.
Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Now for your sports news. We're joined by NTD's Dave Martin over at the Sports Hub. Dave, a lot going on, but let's start in basketball, where the Boston Celtics rebounded from their Game 4 loss to beat Dallas last night and win the NBA title. What were some of their keys to victory?
You know, I thought their balance on both ends of the court made them such a difficult matchup for every team, and that's why they're NBA champions. All 5 starters plus Kristaps Porzingis could hit a three-pointer on one end and then really play high-level defense on the other end. That made them such a difficult matchup. Now, Jaylen Brown ended up winning Finals MVP. I thought that was the right choice. Let's look how he did in these 5 games here. 21 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, 5 assists. But what these don't show is the defense that he played on Luka Doncic. He was the primary defender on Doncic. I thought he did a great job at fighting through his screens and really making Doncic work for every basket. I really thought that was a big key to the series. Meanwhile, for the Celtics, this is one of the league's most storied franchises. This breaks a tie with them and the Lakers for most titles won by a franchise all time. Let's look at the top 4 NBA titles by franchise. The Celtics now have 18, Lakers with 17, then you've got a distant third place, Warriors with 7, and Bulls with 6. So for Celtics fans, they've got bragging rights again over the Lakers, at least until the Lakers win their next title. Now for the NBA, this of course concludes the season, but the next week is the NBA draft. That starts on June 26th and 27th.
Shifting gears to hockey, the NHL's Edmonton Oilers are on the brink of elimination, trailing the Florida Panthers 3-1 with Game 5 tonight in Florida. What do the Oilers need to do to extend the series?
I really think their vaunted power play really needs to get going. It's no secret they're having trouble scoring against goalie Sergei Bobrovsky, whether it's on the power play or even strength. Now, they finally got to him in Game 4, winning 8-1 there, and they finally got their first power play goal of the series. That made them just 1 out of 16, that's 6%. Now in the playoffs up until this point, they were 19 out of 51, that's 37%. It's a very good power play. So at least that shows what they're capable of. Now in the last round against Dallas, they started off slow, but by games 5 and 6, I think they scored 4 power play goals in 5 opportunities, so they can be very good there. Now tonight's game is Game 5. It is going to be in Florida, like you said, with the Panthers leading 3-1. That game is going to be on at 8 p.m. tonight.
Now looking at the WNBA, Sunday's game between Caitlin Clark's Indiana Fever and Angel Reese's Chicago Sky was the league's most watched game in 23 years. Now Clark has been involved in several of the highest rated games this season. What do you think set this one apart?
I think this one, it was her versus her big rival, Angel Reese in the Chicago Sky. Now, this is their second WNBA meeting this year. This was on nationally televised on CBS. They got 2.25 million viewers. Now, the first game featured a little bit of fireworks between Clark and one of Reese's teammates, Chennedy Carter. That's still being talked about a couple weeks later. I also think TV competition matters. This Sunday was Father's Day. There were no NBA, NHL, of course, NFL games on. And Clark's team, the Fever, after starting 1-9, they've now won 4 of their last 6 games, so they're definitely improving. So I think it's going to be it was a combination of things. And I think as her team gets better, you're going to see it probably breaking more TV ratings records as the season progresses.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.